Loss is an inevitable part of life, and grief is a natural part of the healing process.
Whether it's a family member, a friend, a pet, grieving can be difficult, but understanding the stages and types of grief can help find healthier ways to cope with it.
Absolutely. Well, every year on August 30th is dedicated to the awareness surrounding grief. So joining us now is Charles Parker. He's a bereavement coordinator for Hospice of Health First. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
So what is a bereavement coordinator, just to start off?
Well, a bereavement coordinator, we come in after the patient has died. So we work with support groups. We have a variety of support groups that we sponsor. We also make lots of phone calls and talk to folks on the phone to support the families within 13 or so months after. As well, bereavement, we also work with our community. We're not just, you don't just have to be a patient with us in hospice. We're open to the community. We have a suicide grievers group once a week, as well as a variety of other support groups.
Oh, and you work in hospice. So
Yes.
I know we hear that term a lot. We hear about people going into hospice. What exactly is hospice for people who may not be familiar with the wonderful work you do?
Sure. Hospice really takes care, providing care and comfort for those who have terminal illness. We provide pain management as one of the primary things that we do, as well as social and emotional support. We have an interdisciplinary team, that's a hard word to say, excuse me, doctors and nurses, social workers, chaplains, volunteers, support staff, therapy dogs, all working with the patient and families leading on that journey, that final journey that the patient's taking.
And a lot of times with grief, it's just so different in every single person and experience. So, how do you work with people in processing that and sort of being aware as they've said goodbye to, someone or something?
Well, a lot of people have heard of it, the 5 stages of grief by Kubler-Ross, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And it was kind of a misconception. Those 5 stages do not necessarily go in order, and many times they go in a variety of different time frames, and sometimes you might have some anger, move on, but then the anger comes back. So it's a very complicated and complex thing that we deal with. The one thing that I really notice with most folks that we deal with, most families and friends, is just that deep, overwhelming sadness. And that's one of the things that we really work with them on, is that sadness. There's this great author named David Kessler, and he describes this sadness as an unwanted guest. And when you're in grief, and you really have to just accept that sadness. It's just like you let that guest in, you have to sit with that guest as long as they want to stay, and eventually that guest will leave. The guest will continue to come back, but usually the guest will come less frequently, sadness will come less frequently, and won't stay quite as long as time moves on.
And I feel like also putting almost an image to it, like a guest, helps also with children. I mean, how would you help navigate a parent who maybe is dealing with a loss of a family member or one of their friends? How would you deal with talking to children and teenagers?
Well, the first thing, it's more important, I think, instead of talking to the children, is listening to the children, taking cues from them. We have a program called Bright Star, which is for grieving children. It is a wonderful program. We have our director, Nicole Conley, who runs that program, and she's a former school guidance counselor. We work with kids from 5 to up to teenagers. A couple times we have support groups for them, and also while we're working with them, we have support groups with the parents. It's important also to note that children at different ages process grief in much different ways as they grow. Younger kids will sometimes ask very direct questions and want to know very direct things. And many times they feel blame and they feel guilt. They feel like maybe they did something that caused the parent to die. Teenagers, they're much more contemplative, maybe have more of a spiritual connection, and also can be withdrawn as well. So it's really kind of just as grief with adults, grief with children is an individual thing, but giving them space to express themselves and to ask questions and being honest with them is very important.
So for anyone watching who wants to check out some of these programs or needs some assistance, how can they get in contact with you guys?
Well, they can go to hf.org, which is our Health First website. They could call me directly if they'd like, 321-434-3008 or charles.parker@hf.org. Any of those ways we can help out. We'd love to get folks connected with our support groups, with our suicide grievers groups. We have groups both in the north end of Brevard County and the south end of Brevard County, so we kind of split at Piney Causeway for those of you who are familiar with that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
quite
thank
welcome.
you for joining us.
Thank you.